Good evening and welcome. I am glad you all are here tonight, and I'm Susan Mobley, the parish nurse here at Myers Park Methodist Church. And we are excited to begin in our series that is Caregiving, Navigating the Journey. This actually started about a year ago in planning with our health ministries team, some of who are here tonight. As we began last year during this time, we offered a series that was tying up loose ends, which was an end-of-life series. And it was so well received that we looked for some other topics that might be as well received. And we wanted the community to become involved in and open to the sessions open to the community also. And we thought caregiving would be a perfect opportunity to reach out to the community, provide some information, and also to support caregivers. There are approximately 65 million people in our nation who are in caregiving roles, and that's probably a low number. My bet is there's a lot more than 65 million. That's just what is more or less been able to be documented. And the series is going to be recorded. If there are some that could not be here this evening, Jim is recording all four of our sessions. They will not be available till about a week after, like a week from now or sometime next week they'll be available. And Jim, will that be on Myers Park website? Okay. Are there any tips in navigating that, or? Yes. Okay. So when you go to mpumc.org website, go to Sermons and Programs up at the top and click on that. With the drop-down menu, there will be special programs. And when you click under special programs, then you will begin to see this series come up. So I wanted to let you know that. Our topic tonight is caring for those with memory loss, and I have a little bit of a story to tell you concerning that. Barbara Barden, one of our clergy, and I, a couple years ago, went to hear Teppa Snow out at UNCC, and Teppa is an occupational therapist who deals a lot of times with those with Alzheimer's and memory loss, and she was giving tips of how to best care for those folks. And one of her tips that really stood out to me was, when you approach someone with memory loss, be sure you don't startle them. You come at them from the front. Make sure that they are within your line of vision. And I'm going to use my friend Janice Cook here because she knows me in this. Come to that person from the front and extend your hand. And once you extend that hand, turn it over to the top. That gives that person who is wondering who this person might be and how they are approaching you. It gives them some control if their hand is on top. Don't to come to the side or to come around them is a little bit scary. So that was one of her tips that she gave. Another tip that she really gave that I liked a lot was that you could read scripture. And I had heard that before, but I had never really done that. But find something that person with memory loss has a history with. In this faith community, reading scripture often is something of value and important. And I was visiting a man in the hospital that had end-stage Alzheimer's probably about a year and a half ago. And when I saw him and I went to visit, he was in a fetal position, curled up in the bed. And I had just heard Teppa, and I thought, I'm going to try some of these techniques. And so I got out a little book of Psalms in my purse, and I just sat down with him turning away from me in a fetal position, and I started reading some of the Psalms, and very slowly he turned around, and very slowly he looked at me. And after a little bit he said, I really like that one. He said, would you read another? And I read another, and we did this for about 10 minutes or more. And he said, well, I'm just so glad you came. He said, I really like your scarf. Well, I could have fallen off the chair to go from a man who was in a fetal position, unable to talk or turn around, to taking that memory back to hearing scripture that was important and of value to him in his faith, to being able to make complete sentences eye contact and say he heard what I had to say. So I bring that to your attention as we are in this place of faith. Dr. Howell, our senior pastor, has also written a little devotion. I'm just going to read a couple sentences, but his devotion in this book, take my notes off, Seasons of Caring, Meditations for Alzheimer's and Dementia Caregivers. He has one, James wrote one here that is called Held in God's Memory. And James writes, I have found great solace from John Swinston's book, Dementia, Living in the Memories of God, which rightly reminds us that in Christianity, well-being is not gauged by the presence or the absence of illness or distress. Well-being is defined by the presence of God, and God is not distant from one with dementia or from those who love someone with dementia. And I guess I saw that day in my visit and thought that I would share that as we begin to kick off this series. We are excited tonight. Dr. Chuck Edwards is talking about caring for those with memory loss, and we thank you for being here. Chuck is not quite a native Charlottean, but almost. He actually went to Sedgefield Elementary, which is our partner school for Myers Park Methodist, and graduated from Myers Park High. So we are glad that you are here and have stayed in Charlotte all these years. He had a wonderful career as a cardiovascular surgeon, and I told him a few minutes ago he did open heart surgery on my husband when he was 48, and I have been most appreciative and grateful for the many days following for his skill and his knowledge. But he has kind of changed gears at this point in life and has become a gerontologist, I think, and is dealing with those with memory loss due to his history with his own parents. And we're also grateful that he's here and willing to share his expanded knowledge with that topic with us tonight. So welcome him, please.
Thank you, Susan. Are we okay? We don't want both of them, do we? Okay. All right, we all right, Jim? Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank Susan for inviting me, and also to thank you for coming out tonight. I kind of move around a little bit. I'm a little edgy, and you'll have to forgive me for that. Tonight's topic is generational challenges, keeping your parents safe. And when you're getting ready to talk about a subject that is so important, it's really not wise to put yourself up as an expert. So I want to give a disclaimer is that almost every day, this is what I deal with now. In my clinic and taking care of people losing their memories, I have to keep them safe and I have to keep my caregivers safe. So I struggle with this subject. And so tonight what I wanted this to be is very interactive. What I'm interested in is if you've got any techniques that work, I want to know them. If you want to interrupt me or tell me that I'm on the wrong track, I would love to hear it, okay? So we're going to leave lots of times for discussion. All right, we're going to start with two major distinctions, okay? The distinctions are your parents whole or do they have deficits? Whole means that they're aging normally, okay? And we're going to talk a little bit about what normal aging, everybody always wants to know if they're normal, and I'm going to tell a lot of y'all that you're not normal tonight. But the other is deficits, okay? And what we have to do is we have to know exactly where your parents are in this rate of decline in aging and what stage they're in, because that's where we start with the observations of how much help do they need. Now, knowing the stage and rate that your parents are declining, there are three distinct entities, okay? You can have normal cognitive aging, mild cognitive impairment, and Alzheimer's and related dementias, all right? Normal cognitive aging, mild cognitive impairment, and Alzheimer's and related dementias. All right, let's start with normal cognitive aging. Now, this is really discouraging, and this is a subject for another talk, but I read this book by Salthouse about normal cognitive aging. What age do you think we peak at as far as cognitive function is concerned? 60. 25. 25 is it. So we peak. So when you're walking down the street and you see one of these young guys with his hat on backwards and he's got about 1,000 tattoos all over him and he's looking around like he doesn't have any idea where he is, that guy on most tests as far as recall, speed, all those things, he's going to do better than most of us. Now, there are two things, very strangely, that we get better at. One is antonyms. Antonyms. Why? I don't know. But every study shows that when you look at the testing, that the antonyms go up, not by a lot, but enough. And then there's this thing called crystalline memory, and that's kind of like our life experiences, things that you have this judgment protocol, this judgment profile. And they ask you questions like, if a building is on fire, what do you look for if you're on the third floor? Okay? And those of us who are 60, 65, 70, we always get that right, the fire escape. Okay? A lot of people don't get it, but that's the kind of stuff that we do a little bit better on. But normal cognitive aging, there are deficits associated with that. Okay? It's names. We struggle with names. Oftentimes, it's people that we've known all our lives, and someone comes up and surprises us, and by the time that they've gone, the name comes to you. But names we struggle with. Sometimes we'll repeat a story, especially if it's a good one, okay? And that's okay. I wouldn't worry about it. Sometimes with my patients, they get this agoraphobia where they don't want to leave their house. And the reason is because they are having dinner and someone in a table 4 tables over who they should know, they can't remember their name. And they sit there and they ruins their dinner. And then the person comes over to talk to them, and actually they don't have any idea either who they are. So you don't need to worry. And it's okay to say, hey, I'm having trouble remembering your name. Now, if the person comes back and says, you're my brother, then you may need to come and see me, okay? Difficulty with new knowledge. If anybody's tried to get on the computer lately and try to figure out that button that you hit that makes everything go dark, you know that new knowledge is hard. It takes longer to complete a task, and we get easily distracted as we age. So those are all things that are sort of fit in a normal pattern of aging. Also being impatient, which we may talk a little bit about that because that's a very destructive element as we age. So we've got normal cognitive aging. What we look at is 5 domains in our clinic, okay, when we're evaluating someone. We look at short-term memory, language, visual spatial orientation, executive function, and personality and behavior. Those are the things. And there's only one other thing, attention. So if you come in and you're not paying attention, I will mark you down on that. So normal cognitive aging means that you are deficient in only one domain. Usually, it's short-term memory. But it doesn't disrupt your everyday life. So mild cognitive impairment, which, is kind of close to normal cognitive aging, but it's only one domain, and you actually function at a very high level. The Alzheimer's disease is defined as deficits in 2 domains, so that you would have short-term memory. You might have visual spatial problems, meaning that the parietal lobe is involved and that you might get lost when you're driving, or you might walk into a room that you're familiar with and get disoriented. You may have language issues, meaning that you would have trouble finding a word, anomia. You'd get quiet. And you also use what's called paraphasic speech. Now, we all do this. I used to be a whiz at, what's that game, Trivial Pursuits? I used to be a whiz at that game. I mean, bring it on. And now, I was playing it the other day with my kids in a new version, and I don't know any of the movie stars. I don't know any of the music. It's gone, okay? And then I would say something like, who wrote My Girl? And I go, Smokey Robinson. They say, ancient history. You know, it's like the Greeks and the Romans. But, you know, it's really frustrating. So let's talk a little bit about normal cognitive aging. And I'm going to talk about your parents now. That if your parents are whole, that doesn't mean they don't need help. And how this works is that if all of a sudden you start to notice that your parents are failing and you haven't been there for 20 years and you show up and say, oh, Dad, I'm going to do your books and I'm going to take you and you're not going to drive anymore and everything, you're going to get nowhere. They're going to tell you right where to go. So what happens is there's a pattern to this, and there's a slow phasing into their lives, okay? They need a lot of stimulation. They may not recognize it, and we're going to talk a little bit about toxic parents. We'll get to that, because we all our parents have been toxic at one time or another. So what we do is, first of all, and this is the most important thing I'm going to say tonight, is the phone is your enemy. You are not going to learn what's going on the phone. Saying, I call my mother every day, not good enough, not good enough. What we want to do is to have you start to fold into their lives in a way of saying, Mom, Dad, we're going to go see one of the kids play basketball tonight. We want you to come with us. Or we want to come over and have dinner with you at your house. I want to start to understand about your finances. I want to sit down with you and have you teach me some stuff about your finances while they're still whole. So then when the time comes for the transition, like I had with my father, is that, you know, one day I'm over there and I said, Dad, you know, it's April 16th. Did you do your taxes? And he looks at me, kind of funny. I said, Dad, you know April 15th, taxes. Blank stare. So I said, well, okay, let's go up to your, and he always was so fastidious. Everything was right by the money. And I go up there and I got 91, 92, we're in 97 now, 93, no 94, I got no 95, and I got no 96. So I missed it. I missed the boat on it. So gradually, kind of folding into this is the way that we can do it. Especially just on medical problems. Go to the doctor with them, okay? You will be astonished at what they come out with. The guy will tell you, you have terminal cancer and you have about 12 days to live. And you'll ask, Mom, what did he say? He said, I'm doing fine, okay? I mean, that's what you're going to get. So you've got to go with them and listen to it. You don't have to dominate. All you have to do is listen. All right, so with our parents, is there anything that we can do? Are there any sort of protective mechanisms which we can slow down or prevent their decline? Is there any data for this? Well, actually there is, okay? Now, the data that is really exciting is on exercise. And exercise may be the linchpin for preventive cognitive issues. I was late to coming to this because I thought when I first got into this business that apathy is the first symptom of Alzheimer's or dementia. So if someone becomes apathetic, they're not going to go to the gym. In fact, that's a basic truism of life. There are no apathetic people in gyms, okay? Zero. All right. So what happened, so I said, all they're doing is choosing two different groups. The people that are exercising are not apathetic, and then the people that are apathetic are at home. So I said, this is pathetic, you got it wrong. Well, in 1991 and 92, they discovered this substance called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's an amazing substance. It's the miracle grow for your brain. And it is made in skeletal muscle, and it is made in the brain. And when you exercise, it releases BDNF. And that BDNF is associated with making the complex, the interstices between neurons very involved and fecund. And also, it causes the generation of new neurons, okay? So exercise is protective. It also has been shown to be protective in people as they age, and it can be just as little as 30 minutes twice a week. Now, the deal is that the more you exercise up to a point, the better you have. So I'm not saying that you're going to get the full benefit, but it certainly is important for your parents to exercise. In that generation, my father used to think lifting 2 martinis was about as much exercise as he got. He did a lot of that. I mean, I think he really did get a lot of BDNF on that. Also, there was an interesting thing in this book. It's called Spark, and this man that wrote, his name's John Rady, and he's going to come to Charlotte for my symposium in October this year. But he said that 25% of us don't get the runner's high. Okay, so you go and run a 10K, and you come and everybody's going hugging each other. I'm not much of a hugger, and I'm dying. I'm coming in and I'm just glad it's over. And they're saying, "Oh, isn't it marvelous? Isn't it wonderful?" So 25% of us don't get the runner's high. How many people here don't get the runner's high? Huh? It's just drudgery, isn't it? All right. So then I started thinking that those endorphins can be isolated. They're starting to isolate them. So I'm thinking, if I'm thinking about exercising, just go ahead and give me the endorphin. Let me get the runner's high, and then we'll go drink a couple of Budweisers and skip the damn exercise. Okay. Education is protective. That if you take a group of people with graduate degrees, they have a lower incidence and a delayed incidence of dementia as opposed to people with just college degrees. Now, this does not include the University of North Carolina. There's a mistake. You don't have to even go to class there, okay? But the University of Virginia, absolutely, okay. So, so your education level protects you from Alzheimer's. So new knowledge is really important. The thing that's interesting about this is I'm not a big Lumosity and PositScience.com guy, okay? Maybe that's just for futuristic stuff, but if education is protective, why not mimic the education that we had when we were in college, where there's pressure and there's a certain body of knowledge, there's a professor, a lecturer, and so we're going to talk a little bit about this study that we're going to do in Charlotte, but so for your parents, new knowledge. Dad, I got this book I want you to read. Or Dad, we're going to go to this lecture. Dad, we're going to go to this play. Mom, I want you to go to cooking class. Stimulation, okay? The third thing is socialization. What happens is that for some reason people lose the ability to kind of connect with other people. I see a lot of what I call agoraphobia. I don't call it agoraphobia, that's what they call it. The Greeks called it, meaning that I have a fear of leaving my home. And so socialization, if we take 2 groups of people and ask the question, are you lonely? The incidence of dementia and Alzheimer's disease is double in the group that answers yes to that question. Are you lonely? Medication vigilance. On medications, when you are in our society, for some reason, if you're put on a medication, you're on that medication for life because no one wants to take you off. And so what I do in my clinic is I've got this red pen and boom, these medications come off. I'll give you a story. I've got this one gentleman, really nice man, and I go and I said, "Why are you on this postcard? You have a prostate trouble." He said, "Oh, no, I don't have any prostate trouble." He said, "About 20 years ago, my doctor put me on that because it's also caused, Rogaine, that prevented me from losing my hair." And I looked at him, He doesn't have a hair on his head. He is a bald eagle, okay? But here's the sad part is that Rogaine, over a long period of time, can cause sexual dysfunction and it can cause depression, both of which he had. And his wife was furious because he had been on this medication and no one had asked him why he was on it. So any medication that you're on, there has to be a red line as to exactly why you're on it because it has to still be valid. Remember that. Also, there are certain medications that you want to stay away from. I went back to Johns Hopkins for this sort of mini fellowship, and it was 2 summers ago. And we spent a lot of time on medications. And the medications I don't like, and I know I'm going to get in trouble here, are benzodiazepams, Xanax, Ativan, Klonopin, Valium, Librium. Don't like them. And the reason is because they're very addictive. They make you, especially Xanax, it makes you high and calm. Who the hell wouldn't want to take that stuff all day long? Just keep, high and calm. The problem is, though, that you fall, and it really affects your cognition. You are not as sharp on those medications. Also, what? Say those again. Xanax, Ativan, Klonopin, Librium, Valium. Xanax is the real good one. I've never had one, but I can only imagine. Also on medications, the over-the-counter sleep stuff builds up in your system. It can really affect your cognition. RX for depression. As we age, what you'd see in your parents is if you look at a 25-year-old male who is depressed, you can see it in his physiognomy, you can see it in the way that he walks, and he's just down. That's not what happens as we age. What happens when we age is we get anger, we get anxiety, we get agitation, we get anhedonia, we lose the pleasure of things, we get apathetic. So we have to look for those things. And in your parents, if you see them drawn away, very well maybe they're getting depressed and they need to be treated. Also, fluctuations in normal cognition every day are caused by several things that we do. And one is dehydration. That probably 80% of us walk around dehydrated, okay? Now, I just wrote this thing for our blog, and our thing is www.memorycentercharlotte.com, but it's called The Secret Elixir of Life. And it starts off by saying that your local health food store has just come out with this elixir of life. And it not only makes you think sharper, okay, but it makes your heart beat better. It also gives you energy. It makes you full so that you lose weight. It cures constipation. It helps you with your joints because you don't have these desiccated cartilages that tear. If someone were to tell you that you could get an elixir that would do all those things, you'd pay a king's ransom for that, wouldn't you? It comes out of the tap. And we ought to drink at least 4 to 5 large 8-ounce glasses of this a day. And in my patients, I can almost tell when they're dehydrated. So those are the things that are protective, okay? Education, exercise, socialization, attacking loneliness, trying to recognize depression and treating it, getting people off of medications that they do not need to be on, and also just simple things like hydration, and also alcohol. Alcohol for us as we age, alcohol dehydrogenate is this marvelous enzyme that breaks down alcohol. But as we age, it comes down, and we can't mobilize and metabolize alcohol like we used to. So therefore, if it used to be able to have 2 drinks every night, you're not going to be able to read, you're not going to be able to think. And so I really feel like that, I went to the University of Virginia from 1965 to 1969. No one likes to have a drink more than I do, But it's very destructive if we're drinking every day, and I really recommend to my patients that they don't drink alcohol every day. Let's talk a little bit about our responsibilities to our parents, okay? We need to be involved. We need to be observant. But there are 4 major things in our clinic that we stress. We want them calm, safe, clean, and loved. 4 things. The safety issues are calm means that they're not agitated, they're not impatient, they're not angry all the time, they're not depressed, all those things. The safety issues that we stress are driving, really difficult for us. We'll talk a little bit about it. Firearms, okay? They're a disaster for us. It's not so much that I'm worried about suicide. I am worried about suicide in my patients at one crucial time. If someone that is is still in the corridors of power and they have carelessly been given the diagnosis, or they have this epiphany and they realize that they are impaired and they're looking at having to give up everything, that's a time for suicide. But what I'm worried about more than that is the paranoia that goes along as you develop into Alzheimer's disease. I worry about the pizza boy, that all of a sudden they think that he is someone trying to get into their house. He's sitting there with this big Domino's double pizza, and they come out. And so I don't like firearms at all. Stove. We have lots of problems with people burning things up. Medications. Only, I imagine right now, 40% of my people take their medications the way they're supposed to. 40%. And that's with someone that is obsessed with medication. We also have falls. We have a falls prevention clinic. It's one of my most devastating things, falls. Flight, meaning that they leave the house and they start walking around, get lost. And the last is scams. Now, let's talk a little bit about warning signs. Let's say that I think that my parents are whole, and that what am I looking for? What are things that are going to be red flags for me? The first is hygiene. And the second is table manners. My father and mother was so fastidious about table manners. We always had to be the last ones to sit down, first ones to get up, all that stuff. What happens is that those manners, those things that socialize us, they start to go, okay? Sartorial decisions. All of a sudden, your mother, who used to be pristine in the way that she comes down and she's got on the same sweatsuit she had on yesterday, something that she never would, just a red flag. Not a big deal. Maybe she's got it all together, but just a red flag. As we talked about apathy and anhedonia. Let's say that your mother loved to play bridge. She lived for it. And then all of a sudden, she says, I don't really want to play bridge anymore. I don't care. It might be that she's giving it up for a valid reason, but just make sure that that's a major or red flag. Anorexia, or the reverse, is not being able to control your appetite. As people develop into more dementia, you notice that they start to crave sweets. Now, don't get freaked out on this. Don't get freaked out. Everybody that just ate a Snickers bar is not going to have to come to my clinic. But notice that you lose the ability. It's called disinhibition, but you lose the ability to stop. And that's when alcohol really gets people who are early Alzheimer's into trouble. All right, so those are minor things. Hygiene, manners, sartorial decisions, anhedonia, apathy, anxiety, appetite, anorexia, minor things, okay? Just little red flags. What are major things? Well, as far as their safety concerned, it's falls, okay? Falls is the 70-year-old person's 4-letter word. And every day we get a call. Mom's fallen. Falls are really interesting. And the only thing I'll say about them is that every fall deserves an explanation. It's not okay to say, Mom fell. Okay? Now, they're divided into 2 aspects. One is mechanical falls. That's where you make a bad decision, or where you trip, or you can't. Your depth perception is altered, and you don't see the curb, and you go over. Mechanical falls, we can kind of live with those. Then there are also syncopal falls. Those are because of your brain or your heart. And what usually happens then is that people will lose consciousness and they'll just slump down. They don't usually get hurt. Mechanical falls, you get hurt. Syncopal falls, you don't. And then there's also a thing called drop attacks. That's where you slump down or go backwards, but you are totally conscious. And that's usually from some sort of knee, thigh, hip, some sort of weakness, that something gives. But falls are huge. All right, driving. This is one of my biggest, every day I have to deal with this. Trying to get people to tell me that they're the best driver that's ever been. And yet you look at their car and it is a NASCAR nightmare, okay? They've gotten lost, they've gotten tickets, they've had accidents, or here's what happens is the family says, we don't let the children ride with Grampy anymore, but you're going to let Grampy ride all over Charlotte and take someone else's grandchildren out. So I am really tough on this, but there was this article that was written up in the New England Journal about this town in Canada that had a lot of accidents, and apparently a young person was killed. And so the doctors all got together and says, we are going to stop this. If you are of a certain age and you have anything that comes near to making you have to stop driving, we're going to force it on you. Well, what happened was that when they did it, the number of accidents dropped precipitously, but also the number of patients that went to those doctors dropped precipitously too. They all went to another town so everybody knew that the doctors were going to lose those patients. All right, what are the clues about cognition in memory? What do they do? How do I know that they're losing their memory? Just telling a story over, a couple of times is not it. What happens is they start to repeat questions, okay? And they will ask you the same question over and over. Episodic loss, okay? You're with your mom and dad, and you turn to your mom and say, wasn't it great to see the Joneses last night? We had dinner with them. And all of a sudden, she'll look at you. She has no idea that she was with the Joneses, okay? Very serious when you drop an episode. If you miss an appointment or you've forgotten it, you know what? We all do that. We all do that. But a pattern of it means that you're losing the ability to plan and sequence. Medication errors are really scary, especially on things like Xarelto, what is it called? The other one like Xarelto, like Coumadin, any type of cardiac medication, you got to know that they're taking that right. We have all the time people that double up on Coumadin, and usually they don't miss they're being fastidious, and they'll take twice as much. That's what they do. They don't take half as much, they take twice as much. Alcohol, as you get to a certain age, I don't mind people having one drink, but this business of having 3 and 4 and you're 82 or 84 years old, you're going to fall. It's a recipe for disaster. Notice that disinhibition, meaning that people will start to make very strange comments. They'll sometimes be sexually inappropriate. It's from the frontal lobe where we're socialized, and as the frontal lobe starts getting involved, you'll notice that sometimes a grandfather can make a very suggestive comment to a granddaughter. Anything like that, it's a red flag. These things don't just happen. Where we get into trouble lots of times is on diet too. If you go over to your parents' house and you notice that say, what'd y'all have for supper last night? So, well, we weren't too hungry, okay? We just had cocktail peanuts and 2 gin and tonics, okay? It's probably a bad sign, all right? It's probably a bad sign. I don't like TV dinners. I don't like what it says. It means no one's watching here. These people are putting TV dinners. They're 82 years old, and we need to do better than this. But we see this all the time. All right, scams. Now, TV dinners. Is that what you had for dinner tonight? No. Okay, all right. You'd be crazy to say it. Scams. We have had one patient early on lose $1 million. We had one lose $300,000. And every week we have people that scam themselves out of $15,000 or $20,000. We have people go to the gun show with their card and come away with 15 guns to the tune of $17,000. So we're really fastidious about people that are starting to lose their memories and also their ability to have insight and judgment with open-ended credit cards. Also, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to deny I ever said it if someone comes up and asks me, but in these really nice CCRCs, you all know what they are, the continuing care retirement communities. There are lots of employees there that are aware of who's got all their marbles and who don't, or who doesn't, excuse me. I spent 4 years in Chapel Hill, that's where I picked that up. So they will target, they will call, or they'll have people call. So, and they will give out their Social Security number, because as you become less disinhibited, you no longer can protect yourself. You don't know that giving out this number is going to cause them to be able to get money from me. So we're really careful about scams. A lot of credit cards, sometimes we'll keep one credit card. It'll be a debit card. It'll have a limit of $250. The most dangerous one is the credit card tied to your 401k down at Charles Schwab, okay? That's not a good one to have them carry around because, as you know, is there anybody here that hasn't had their identity taken and that you had to get a new card? You've never had it? You've never had it? That's pretty good because I had it 4 times in one month. I think Bank of America was having a little trouble there. All right. How many of y'all grew up in a Leave It to Beaver type of house where everything was perfect, mom and dad were perfect, and there was never a crossword said? Well, I'm Irish Catholic, all right? We used to get the hell beat out of us at home, okay? And also, I'm not buying this about Leave It to Beaver. All families are dysfunctional. Now, they're all dysfunctional in a different way, but they're all dysfunctional, okay? So why is it so difficult for us to confront our parents, okay? Why is it that we can't make the case that we're telling you the truth, Mom, and we're just trying to make you safe? What is it? Well, the first thing is that if we haven't sort of set the groundwork, they perceive this as taking away their freedom, that you have no right to come in here and tell me I can't drive. Even though I can't see 20 feet in front of me, I still have this right. Americans, we're kind of tied to our rights. They perceive it as taking away their freedoms. Also, that interface is complicated by our underlying relationships, okay? That you've always had a certain relationship with your mother who has a temper. And for your whole life, what you've done is you've danced around this lady because you didn't want to piss her off. And so now every time you think about confronting your mother, you get this tremendous anxiety. 3, the anxiety. All right, anxiety is this marvelous evolutionary feeling. And for millions of years, it allowed us to survive. It's that feeling inside of us that something's not right. Okay, I don't know if I'm a little nervous here. What's going on? And that's what allowed you to turn around and see the lion getting ready to eat you or know what danger was. Okay? Anxiety is the impending feel of danger. Well, what's happened now is it's turned back on us. is that it used to be a survival mechanism, and now we're all walking around, and the anxiety we get is because we can't get a parking place at Harris Teeter, okay? So we've blown it all out of proportion. Or I've got this luncheon today that I got to get to, and you got all worked up over it. Well, what happens with anxiety is any memories that are lodged in your brain with emotion, there's this little almond-shaped place in your brain called the amygdala. It means almond in Greek. And what happens is that when something is lodged with emotion, you're not going to forget it. It is there. You can remember the day that you got cut from the basketball team, where you were crushed. In fact, it's kind of ironic because all the bad things in our life, if we said something that hurt someone's feelings or we did something really egregious, you think about it, you get that same feeling that you got when it happened. You know, you get that creepy feeling. You know, your arms get kind of tingly and you can actually physically go, I can't believe I did that. 50 years after it happened. What the cruel part of this is all the great times. You score 35 points in a basketball game, you don't get that feeling. You know, it's like all the good stuff is gone, the bad stuff sticks around. No wonder we're so anxiety dominated. But what I'm after here is this, is that when you're trying to deal with a problem and you're going toward the solution and you feel anxiety, the first thing you want to do is pull away. You want to say, I hate this feeling, I can't stand it. But the only way that you can solve the problem and work around it and get to the truth is working through that anxiety. So when you are afraid you're going to make your mother mad, you've got to go right there, take it on, and then solve the problem, okay? Because we're all being manipulated, oftentimes in our society, by the people that are the least able to be in charge. They're the ones that are going to have a temper tantrum, and everybody walks around them. So what I see is with my families, and they all meet with me and we have strategies, is that the ones that are the most incompetent and the most emotionally unstable have the most power. Okay. Family dynamics, lack of family support. Having your brothers and sisters on board with you is one of the most important things that you can have. Kind of a consensus, but it's difficult to do. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about strategies. Excuse me. Each safety issue stands on its own, and each family is unique, so that each family will have a different way to solve their own problems. And the reason why I make this statement is because you read a whole bunch of literature. You'll pick up, there are 1,000 books out there on Alzheimer's disease and how you handle certain, and I'll be reading them, and sometimes I'll say, hey, that sounds like a pretty good idea, but most of the time I'll say, you know, that might be great for you, but for 90% of people, it makes no sense at all. So I want you to have confidence in your own ability to size things up and not just go by, you know, some cookbook, because that cookbook almost never works. Second thing is all hands have to be on deck when you're dealing with parents that are unsafe. You've got to get their neighbors. You've got to get your brothers and sisters. Now, for me, what happened was my brother is an admiral in the Navy, okay? And he ended up with 3 stars, all right? So he's not on receive. He's on transmit, okay? And he's going all over the world. So I get a call. I'm talking to him, and I say, God, Dad, Mom just aren't doing very well at all. You know, we're thinking about taking them and putting them in Plantation Estates or wherever it was. And he goes, you know what? He said, I don't know what planet you're on, but I talk to my dad 3 times a week. He is right on the money. He knows all about the Chicago Cubs. He can tell me whether the Cubs won or lost. That's the only thing he could tell you, okay? But he couldn't turn the damn TV on, okay? But he could convince my brother that he was right on the money, okay? So my wife has this she's kind of a Machiavellian character. And she said, what we ought to do is have mom and dad, what we'll do is we'll drive them up and they can spend a couple of days with your brother, okay? Took them 20 minutes before my brother called me and said, I give. But that's what you do. You invite your brother and sister down. You either take them up and deliver them, but the more they're around them, because you're not going to convince them. You are not going to convince them until you're blue in the face. They're going to think you are hard and unfeeling and you want their money or whatever, okay? Also, the third problem we have is the principal caregiver, the spouse, is unrealistic. They're in denial, and they're trying to be protective. It's a good instinct, but there are two schools on this. The one school is I will wait till something catastrophic happens, and then I'll step in, okay? That's a great one, okay? And that's probably the one. The other is I want to go down as a martyr, all right? That's the one. I had to tell, my mother, that Mom, we are out of martyr badges. We're out of them. We don't have any right now. We're into realistic. The fourth thing I want to stress is don't assume that a simple solution will be rejected. For instance, I had to take my dad's car keys away. And it wasn't easy, but I took my son with me, more for protection than anything else. Sat down, and I had to tell him. I said, Dad, you've made a couple of errors. It's not going to drive anymore. And it gave me but what I told him was, I said, all my life, you were the one that taught me to be responsible. You were the one that said I had to live up to expectations. I had to do things right. And now, when it's my turn to take responsibility for you, you're telling me not to be responsible. It's unacceptable. Now, for him, that got him. That might not work for you, but don't assume that just saying, we're going to stop driving because you're 92 years old is not going to work, because oftentimes it will. And what you've done is you've taken that anxiety that they have. They're nervous as everything driving. And so you say, notice how nervous you are. Why don't you let us provide you? Now, when you take away the driving, you've got to have something to put in its place. You've got to have a driver. You've got to have an option for them. Certain things are non-negotiable. One is any physical force or the potential that the caregiver could get injured. That for us is we already had caregivers get hurt. They can get hurt very badly. So if there's any force, they either leave or we confront the patient. Oftentimes that's the catalyst that they can't stay in the home anymore. We like to have patients stay in their home until they die. That's our goal. But sometimes if they're really aggressive, we can't. All right, so I'm going to end up here. What does it take to sort of manage this? It takes the ability to solve a problem. Now you say, that sounds real simple, solving a problem. The number of people that can solve a problem in this world are very few, okay? It takes being able to recognize the problem in a truthful way. Second, you have to have the energy to recruit the resources to solve the problem. And then the third thing, which is really hard, is you have to be persistent, because your first diagnosis or your first attempt is going to fail. And you've got to have that persistence to say, I'm not quitting. I'm going to do this. I'm going to have the courage to make my parents safe and everyone else safe, especially when it comes to driving. This subject is so important because we don't get tested very, very much. We create tests for ourselves, but we don't really get tested where we need courage to solve something. And people don't ride around on white horses anymore. You're just confronted with something, and if you turn your back on it, you're not the same person that turned toward it and solved it. This is all being human and living up to the expectations. So I want to make sure that you understand that it's not easy. And it takes a lot of courage, and it takes character. But when you see something, you've got to go toward it. You've got to take care of it, and you can't be afraid. I'm going to end with, I want to tell you about this. My clinic, we have a study that we're getting ready to do. We're going to recruit 200 patients, and the stimulus was a study that came out of the University of California, Los Angeles, and it was only 10 patients. But what they did was they did this really very dynamic nutritional support, exercise. Ours is going to have a new knowledge component. Theirs did not. And then ours is going to have an interventional for anxiety issues and depression and things. But we're going to collect 200 people. Now, in the 10 patients that they did, they had one that was diagnosed and was too far gone. And so they did not get a benefit. But 9 of them got benefit. 6 people who had had to retire because of mild cognitive impairment went back to work. So what we're thinking is that we are going to try and see whether or not this exercise, new knowledge, nutrition is going to be at least delay. And I don't want to use, if you use the word prevent, you're going to get into trouble. But that's what we're going to do. And so this is going to be from ages 50 to 70 in people with a direct relative, a mother, father, grandfather, grandmother who had dementia. Okay, that's going to be the proband or the group. All right, well, listen, I'm going to stop now. I think I've talked too long, but I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Have any tidbits on, I am a primary caregiver for my father, who's 95, lives near Augusta, Georgia. Phone, the question?
I'll repeat it when she finishes it. Okay.
The phone that's our enemy has to be, I can't be there. He still lives alone, drives, does his income taxes. He's pretty sharp.
What she's asking is that her father lives in Augusta, Georgia, and obviously she lives in Charlotte, North Carolina, and she can't be there. And her only real contact, at least consistently, is the phone. He still drives. He still does his taxes. I think that you can get an idea. There's a way. I don't think the phone is going to necessarily be the way that you can consistently rely on it, okay? But he lives with, he has his own house. He's still living by himself. He has neighbors.
They're about his age.
Yeah, you got it. Well, this is a really difficult, it's a very difficult thing. I just think you have to be very vigilant in what a great blessing it is. He may not get it, okay? He may be one of the people, and so maybe we don't have to worry about him. But actually, 94, it's too old to be driving. I'm glad I don't have to tell him that, but it's true, yes. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What are some ways to problem solve that not driving? You gave yours, and you're right, families are so different. What strategies have you seen that could help get that driving and without tearing apart the family?
Well, first of all, you can't reason with someone who has gotten to the point where they've lost the ability to orient in space, they get lost, or I don't really mince words with this I'll tell people straight up, you can't drive. One of the hooks that I have for my patients that are wealthy is that if we have an accident, your family, everything you have is going to be gone. And it will be gone. We've seen it go. So that's one. You can play games with it, but if you hurt someone, they'll come and take everything you have. The other thing we have is the DMV in South Carolina is a little bit better than North Carolina, but they have a form, and I'll fill it out. And if they're coming up, obviously now, you can renew without even going to the DMV. You just say I want it, and a certain number of us can get by with that. But if I write a letter, then they will test them, okay? But this is one of the hardest things I deal with. But sometimes when I am as forceful as I am, then the family it gives them cover. Dr. Edwards is a real jerk. And they'll say, I'm not going back. But my point on this is, I'll do that all day long. If I lose a patient and they're not driving, that's a good deal for me, okay? Because I feel like my grandchildren are driving around in these roads and I'm not going to have. But it's really difficult. I'm afraid I'm not that great at it. Yes?
What is an alternative to them driving themselves?
Well, we have, one of the things we do in the clinic is that we have recruited all kinds of companions, caregivers. We have about 15 compassionate care organizations, and they can provide drivers just like that. So someone comes and picks them up, brings them home, takes them, what they want to do is go, I want to drive because I want to go to the hairdresser. Well, what happens if I have someone pick you up, take you to the hairdresser, then take you out to lunch, and then take you home? Oh, I wouldn't want to put anybody out, but you've got to have the alternatives. And it's got to be flexible. It's got to be flexible. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have a parent or someone who has some of these criteria. Is it the family doctor who first might notice, like give you an initial diagnosis and then you go to the...
Well, you're asking the wrong guy on this because I don't know how in 4 minutes they can do this, okay? You go to now, modern medicine is now controlled by healthcare organizations. Are there any healthcare administrators in here, by the way? Would you raise your hand? None? All right. So we can talk. So what's happened is that the healthcare organizations are in charge, and they want primary care physicians to see 30 people a day, all right? Now, what you pay me for is the time of my thoughts, not coming in and filling out that computer sheet or having a very organized office. Okay? What you pay me for is to sit and listen to your problem and try to solve what that problem is. They can't do it in 5 minutes. Okay? Also, they're very reluctant to make a diagnosis. Okay? It takes me 2 hours to work up a new patient. I can see 6 patients a day. We're starving to death, all right? But I can see 6 patients a day, 2 hours. It takes me about 45 minutes to see a return patient because they got problems. I would say that the only neurologist, I'm sure that there are lots of really good people out there, and I'm sure there's a lot of good primary care guys, and I don't want to paint all of this, but for dementia and Alzheimer's, you need someone that does this for a living. That's what they do. We test, and I'm not trying to, I don't want any more business. I got a lot of business, but I'm just telling you, I don't want you to be disappointed because nothing's worse than you having this tragedy, having your mom and dad there, your dad doesn't have any idea, he's pissed off, and then someone comes in and says 5 minutes, says, well, we'll get to that next time, and it just doesn't work.
Do you meet with the family first before the patient comes, or do you have to have all that at one time?
What we do is, it's very set. It's very set, okay? So I meet the family and the patient together, okay? We take a history. I get an idea of who they were, what all's been going on, mostly with focus on the patient. And then I test the patient in front of the family. Because oftentimes what happens is they say, well, mom's just beginning to lose her memory. Okay? So then we go through one of the tests. Let's just start off with something simple. What season is it? It's spring. What month is it? September. And the day of the week, it's Sunday. And all of a sudden, the family members will go, Mom, you know it's Thursday. And so I got everybody on the same page because then they understand. Then what happens is the patient goes for further testing into the exam room for a depression screen and then for my nurses to work them up, blood pressure and all that stuff. And then I meet with the family for about 15 minutes alone. Then I go in and examine them. And then we do some lab and an x-ray, and then they come back, and we have, and we also have this thing called Caregiver Connections. It's 5 2-hour sessions we give in the spring and in the fall. And what we do is we take all the caregivers that are active in the practice from the very beginning of the disease all the way through hospice. And that's where we get a lot of our strategies and how you handle and divert things.
I understand every case is different. So with my dad has Alzheimer's and he lives down by Hilton Head. And my stepmom is his caregiver. They still live in their house, but I think you mentioned that sometimes people do better in their home. But we're at the point we're going to strategize because I don't think it's going to be safe.
It's not safe.
Well, I mean, it's a big house and my father can't maintain things. And
Can we hear the question?
Well, she's talking about her father and stepmother live in Hilton Head, and they're living in their home. And she was saying that she realizes that we like to keep people in their homes, but that she's not sure that the house is safe now.
yeah, because my sister and brother, they live in New York. I live here, and we visit quite a bit, but we're trying to do everything we can.
Well, I do like patients to stay in their homes, but, I have a lot of indigent 24/7 care. It's about $7,500 $7,500 a month. That's a pretty big chunk. Right now in my life, I'd have trouble writing that check. So we've got to come up with other alternatives. They live in a big house, so they can sell that house, but he's got it.
And he is so opposed to any kind of change at
Yeah.
this point.
He's not the one that can make the decision, is he? I know, but he's the one making the decision now, isn't he? Yeah, that's your problem. And yes.
What would be some things that would be definitive going from mild cognitive impairment to dementia? And also with my dad, who's 88, lives alone, mother died 4 years ago. I put signs on his refrigerator like drink 2 bottled waters a day, sign on his bedside table, put lotion on after your shower. He still can't do it. He wants to do it. And he'll say, I'll do better. But he doesn't do it. So when do you know it goes from the mild impairment to something more serious?
Well, mild cognitive impairment has the connotation that it doesn't disrupt your daily life, okay? That you're able to live and compensate for short-term memory. When you get into Alzheimer's, and of course we have testing, okay? If I were to test him, we use what's called the MoCA, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, and if you're up around 26, 25, 24 out of 30, you're probably in that mild cognitive impairment. But if we're getting down toward 21, 22, where he's missed a couple of kind of simple things, then we're looking at more Alzheimer's. And remember, Alzheimer's is more than one domain. That we would have to be looking at language, visual spatial. Is it a 2-story house?
Yeah, but he could be on one story.
He is on one story. Well, it sounds like you're a good son with all the signs and everything. This is a tough thing. But if he's relatively safe, he hasn't fallen. Does he still drive?
No, and his mother lived 100 days. But he's not going to make it probably to 95.
Well, we'd like to keep him, and if you have this long-term care insurance, my philosophy on this is use it up front. Use it. Have people come in. Is he a veteran?
Yes.
Okay. So the VA will pay for something like 20 hours a month to have someone come in, and sometimes you can't get someone to accept help. But if it's the VA, they'll say, Dad, you stormed Omaha Beach. The VA owes you this damn thing. He goes, I know it. Damn it, I was shot at. And so then you get caregivers in there. You get caregivers. So I love the VA thing. One of the things that we see as a tragedy is all the Agent Orange. It is incredible how much Agent Orange I see. It is, these guys come in and it's a tragedy. It's really bad. If you'll call, I'll give you a card and we'll get you in touch. There's a VA kind of coordinator that we use, and I've got I'm always real reluctant to recommend, things, but I can do a good job, and you would be smart enough to know when he wants to put you in some kind of plan. But we can help you with that. I'll get.
Just a comment that they are looking at changing those VA rules for aides in attendance and cutting that. So you need to get in touch with your Congress people to, they're looking at cutting.
They're not going to cut. Actually, the VA is not going to get cut right now because the politicians are scared to death of the VA right now.
Can you just briefly say what is your strategy for people that are addicted to, I'll say specifically Klonopin, how to get them off and deal with the anxiety that they're taking it for?
Well, Klonopin is I'm probably got myself into trouble here, but Klonopin has a very long half-life. Okay, so if you're taking Klonopin every day, its half-life is 38 hours. It builds up in your system, and you can see the Klonopin walk, bent, this little shuffle thing, okay? So what you do is you take it, what I would do is it would take me probably 9 months to get her off of Klonopin. And what I would do is I would cut it in half, cut it in a quarter, and then probably substitute a kind of a short-term SSRI or something that would help us. But at Hopkins, the joke was, don't ever start one and don't ever stop them. But I have to get these people off because they fall. Has she fallen? Oh, yeah. Okay. And not that I feel better about that. I'm sorry. It's just, yes, sir.
You talk about aging in your own home, but as distance becomes an issue for caregivers, that aren't within the home, what do you recommend about maybe moving those families? Because then they have all of those memories about where things go and their orientation, going back to they lose that spatial ability that they had for their home of 40 years. How do you manage that kind of transition to a new place?
Well, I would have to say that usually if they are at the point where you're relying on what they remembered 40 years ago, visual spatially, you're not going to be able to stay. I mean, I would prefer if them to get help in the home and stay there, okay? Because it is very disruptive. It's spiritually and very disruptive. And what happens is that they'll tell you, I look in the mirror and I don't even know where I am or who I am. So I like to keep people there, okay? But let's say it's not safe. Let's say it's 2 stories. They're falling all over the place, or we can't get their medications. Then for them to go into an assisted living, or if they're really impaired and they're alone, then most of the time we undershoot when we go and you say, okay, mom and dad are fine. Let's get them into independent living out here at Southminster, all right? Well, actually, they can't do independent living. You're just bringing on another problem. In fact, most of them can't even do assisted living. So they should be in memory care, which is another issue and which is tough. So, I really, if I had resources, I would put them up front to try to keep them in their home. Because just as you say, I thought I was doing a good thing. My dad loved, he was an old school kind of guy, World War II veteran and things. And so he had a Buick LeSabre or something. He loved that LeSabre. It was about 22 years old. So my brother and I bought him a Buick Park Avenue. Boy, he was happy that day. We come back home, and he can't figure out how to use the knobs or anything. It just completely. So I would have to go over there with duct tape and put it over the things that he couldn't touch, okay? And the whole thing was duct taped. So finally, I just duct taped the whole thing. Then he started to obsess about the light in the garage. And he would call me on the phone and say, Chuck, can you come over here and tell me whether this light is on in the garage? And I'd say, damn it, Dad, go out there. Is the damn thing on or isn't it? He said, I'm not sure. There's a lot of reflections. He said, I appreciate you coming over there. So I drive over and tell him, now, everybody's case is different, but I had to 20 times in my life go to my father's garage and tell him whether the light was on. So it gets crazy. Thank y'all very much. Yep.